All right, I'm here with the pet. Pet, it's been ages since I've seen you, mate. It seems like such a long time.
I know it hasn't been longer than 2 weeks, but for us, obviously, with the schedules that we like to keep and the sort of high society that we, company that we keep as well, like 2 weeks obviously is far too long for the chief and the pet.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I was sort of mentioning is obviously didn't have you on last week. You had Josh from further north. Josh has been on the media circuit actually since I saw him. He actually he was on 3AW on the weekend.
What was it on a North related topic?
Well, they had him before the game, before the Essendon North game. They brought a guy in from the Sash, and they brought him in, and they had a long conversation about the two supporter bases together. So, yeah, Josh is on Media Street.
It's huge. Look, I think obviously we all know that from the outer is just a stepping stone from people to sort of get to even higher heights. I didn't know it was possible, but obviously probably the height of that Saturday evening was probably that interview, because it certainly wasn't the game that followed.
No.
Yeah.
No, that was. We'll get into the games after this, but it was a disappointing one. Actually, it's been an interesting week actually, Pep, because just like we were chatting before the pod, Desi Freeman got done.
Yeah, they got Desi.
They lit him up like a Christmas tree. The SOG.
Yeah, how quickly is there a Netflix or Paramount or HBO Max documentary? Like, is it already in the works? Should we be looking out for it? Is it released next week?
Who stars as Desi though? It's going to have like Desi, Margot Robbie, like all of the. No, probably not Margot Robbie. Like we're talking about like sort of C-level Australian performers. Maybe Delta Goodrem as Desi's partner.
Yeah. Lost Without You, potentially the soundtrack that starts the movie as well. So
Joel Edgerton as Desi.
Yeah. Yeah, that would probably be right. You'd probably recycle a lot of the cast from Underbelly, season 1 in some capacity, and just because I personally miss that whole cast.
Eric Bernard? What about Eric?
Yeah,
What's he doing?
I don't know what he's doing. Certainly not doing any Chopper Read sort of sequels, which would be huge, by the way, if there was a Chopper Read sequel, or prequel.
Well, he's dead, so it's going to be hard to really do too many more stories about Chopper these days. Great movie, though.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best.
One of the great movies. Best performance of his career, Eric Bernard.
Easily, yeah. There's no cash here. Here, there's no cash. He's one of the greats. Bernard, when he gets onto a sort of role that he just feels comfortable with, it's pretty amazing.
I do think that there'll obviously be more to come from this Desi situation. I want to know how he got all the way from Port Punker to this other place, which is 150k north.
What is the like rumours?
Well, look, as you know, I have my ear close to the ground when it comes to all of these sorts of things. Finger in many pies, so to speak. A lot of people that I know are part of the thin blue line that is the police force, and they seem to think that, well, the locals are telling them that once he got out of the immediate region, that he could potentially basically walk all the way to New South Wales through super dense bushland and killing sort of deer and so forth and living a very subsistence lifestyle. It's possible, and apparently he was a bush type guy, so maybe that's what he did. But he was shacked up at some guy's backyard who doesn't even live there most of the year, who's living in a shipping container. They used basically a super armoured Land Cruiser with, how crazy is this? They had basically this giant pole on it, similar to the light poles that we use in our studio from the outer, and they drill it through the wall of the shipping container or the wall of the house and just fill the whole thing with capsicum spray.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, look, didn't they? They had what, like 300 people after him, didn't they? Something ridiculous.
Millions and millions of dollars spent trying to get Desi.
It's crazy what we like. Obviously, you have to chase him, but not that. Yeah, it's still crazy these sort of manhunts, and what it does for the sort of tourism industry of Porapunka. Only time will tell, really. But you can imagine there'd be a few more stopovers than usual potentially in Porapunka.
Oh, you'd think so. I mean, I don't. What's the coffee like in Porapunka? I think it'd be shit.
I think it'd be shit, but it'd be the same price as everywhere. That's the one thing that really shocks me. I've been doing a bit of regional sort of travel for NPL in general, and you have like such a variety of what things cost, whether it's from sports, cinema, other perspective. But the one thing they just charge $6 for, left, right, and centre, is just a coffee. No matter where you're at now, it's like it's almost the new Big Mac index.
Killer. Are you getting done by petrol at the moment as well?
I am, yeah. I'm not as concerned as the rest of society, mainly because I've lived in debt for the majority of my adult life. So pushing into further debt isn't really a concern. And I sort of enjoy watching the dollar signs crawl up as quickly as they do now when you fill up. But certainly, obviously, we'll take the 25-cent cut that's coming tomorrow.
That's tomorrow, is it?
I believe it's tomorrow.
The excess is coming off.
Yep.
It's all due to your mate, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Which one is that? I've got a wide array.
I know you've got a lot of figurative sort of geopolitical friends. One of them is Benjamin Netanyahu and the other one is Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, yeah, two close friends. Look, they're quite busy, so the usual group chat where they respond positively to my assessment and advice and critique on some of their past decisions probably hasn't been as lit up as usual. So none of those screenshots I can send where you heard it from me. I imagine you having a relationship where you just intermittently send them funny Instagram reels, and they just react with a laughing emoji or a heart. Respond via text, just different emojis. Sometimes like the vomit emoji as well. Like the less said the better type of relationship I've developed with those guys. But they're obviously causing a bit of havoc, and you're straight that you love to reference, still one of the more critical straights, and still causing a lot of trouble for people's plans all around the world.
It's really causing havoc, isn't it? And part of me thinks that Benjamin Netanyahu he'd probably benefit from you sending him some Dan does footy memes.
He would, and if I wasn't so committed to the Essendon presidency, which is now something that I'm going to fast forward earlier than 2030, maybe the Israeli presidency prime minister candidate would be something that would be on my radar. But as sad as the world state affairs are currently, I actually think it's comparably sad what's happening down at Tullamarine. So,
here's a question: how do you? Let's talk about this just for a moment. What does the groundswell of support look like? How do you start that process to become president of a football club? Because obviously, Essendon is it's one of the oldest football clubs in the league. It has significant wealthy coterie groups, well supported. But I guess my question more so is, how do you ascend to a point where, number one, you are a power broker within a football club, firstly, and number two, get to the point where you've got enough votes to be able to be voted in as a president?
Great question. It's funny, I've actually legitimately been looking into this because while it's always had some joke element to it, it's always had some serious element, and actually now, especially in light of recent events that we're talking about prior to the podcast, there's an extra bit of mental capacity to take this on, especially due to no sleep. So I've essentially gone from 16 hours in the day to 24 hours. But there's two parts of it. One of it is, probably the most important part, is that you need the backing of the power brokers. And without that, you're just absolutely no chance. So that's something that is actually not out of the realm. There's enough connections have either second or third degree or first that know some existing Essendon power brokers or others that would be happy to introduce me to at the right time, of course, which sort of leads me to my second point, which is you do need to build a groundswell of public support in some way. Whether that is starting a platform, it might need to be a separate Essendon podcast to start that platform, have sections on it which actually relate to your presidential pitch and candidacy. It might be other ways of trying to do that, but that's probably the way. You need to sort of build a cult following with some respect that's actually serious about what you're trying to build. And then I guess that all links to the third one. You still need some sort of clout, like regardless of whether I was the son of a power broker and had a podcast with, 1 million listeners. If I'm sitting there at 20 and, I haven't really done anything that shows, a sporting acumen or some clout there. And that's probably where NPL needs to reach a certain level of success for me to even be considered. So it's all of those things, and all of them are achievable and none are out of the realm, but all three probably need to happen if we're honest about actually getting through this. But if there's anyone that's going to be committed to it, and there's a lot of people around me that I know that would support in some way, and it's funny when you start to vocalise things a bit more openly and start to actually do something, it's funny the type of supporters or connections you didn't even know that you have that can open some sort of the doors if they believe in you. So yeah, I think business and sporting clout, an actual platform that people know about, and then the classic who through the power brokers, and then who knows from there.
A powerful ally would be the many social media accounts that are frequented by the Essendon faithful. Don the Sash, that Lebanese guy who just talks shit the whole time. He'd be a great one, just get him on board, and then you'll have an army of followers. And once you've got a groundswell of support and you can help guide them in the right direction, I really think you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Imagine if, right, during a quarter of your choosing during a game, let's say the second quarter, right? You are able to band together with a bunch of thousands of fans that say, we're walking out of this game for a quarter. We're going to come back in. No, we're going to come back in. We're going to walk to the steps of just outside Marvel Stadium. You, Pet, are going to be there with a megaphone and you're going to sort of list the demands that you want to see happen at the football club over the next little bit. And then after that second quarter's finished, at halftime, all the fans file back in. That's a poignant.
That is.
A poignant visual, and also it's something that the football club and the media, most importantly, will take notice of.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's something like that. It's whether the campaign wants, the last thing I want to do is come in and maybe orchestrate an overthrow sort of V for Vendetta type campaign. Not because it wouldn't be fun. I think that would be the most fun type of campaign, one built on sort of, hatred and violence, essentially. But I don't think those campaigns have had much success necessarily in the history of the world. They potentially lead to the outcome in the short term. So yeah, if there's a way to get the media behind and do something similar to that without it seeming like almost like a religious or cult or overthrowing type thing, the basis of my campaign isn't actually going to be groundbreaking, and I think that's the whole point. Is it's not coming in and going, we're going to revolutionise the Essendon Football Club. We're going to find heights that we've never found before. We're going to do things in a different way. It's like sort of the opposite of that. It's like actually going back to as if we had an IKEA manual on how to run a club and just following that manual and being like, these are the really simple 10 things we're going to do that I'm shocked that we don't do. And 8 of them are clearly done by successful clubs. And here's evidence of why we're not doing them and how that flows onto on-field success or lack of success. And so with that is less of a, media-driven, exciting message. So it's really, to your point, it is about, though, how do you still find those moments to potentially build a a following and an audience that actually captures attention. And I think that's where it does come to some of those existing earpieces, and finding the right ones. And if you do that, with the right intentions and hopefully a bit of charisma around the actual, approach that you're going with, if I had to give odds, like if I'm going to set myself for this over the next 4 years, which I'm genuinely going to, the odds for me are like if I set myself. So if I follow through with everything that I'm going to do, I think it's about a $4 chance.
That's better than I thought. Yeah,
it's not in any way a certainty, but like at full pelt in all of those areas and everything we spoke about done properly. I think there's a genuine chance. There would be bigger underdog stories that have reached CEO or presidency in clubs than myself, I would say. And not necessarily that many, but they would be bigger.
My big problem with your campaign is I was just going to assume that it was all sizzle, no sausage. But it is actually the opposite, which is really disappointing to me. It's all sausage, no sizzle.
It's
you know what I mean?
In a way, because of that, because it doesn't lend itself to the easy to write articles.
I think that's what builds that media support, the groundswell of supporter support. I think you've got to appeal to the lowest common denominator, which is the football fan.
I think you do, but I think that's where I actually can excel. I don't know if there's anyone who balances, being one of the great nuffies and then being, still having teeth and being able to articulate other thoughts that well. I've always connected well with the nuffies because I speak like them on occasion. And I've been through, I could reel off every single heartbreak, every team decision, every good win as well. I think that's one of the other things that will be critical in this campaign is, the remembering of the good times that we still want to recreate, as opposed to pointing to everything sort of being negative. And to an extent, some of the rants and the deep dives into Essendon of the past probably need to be quelled somewhat and be more solution-based, although usually I am. But I think, to your point, there probably does need to be one hook that is more, around a PR sort of driven angle. And that's something to sort of work with key confidants such as yourself and others that might show interest in the campaign. And
Kate, obviously, big marketing person.
She's always asked why I haven't got the Essendon presidency already. Her understanding is that it was a complete, and that it was just a matter of time. I'm sure if she listens to this podcast and the big three things we talked about, that it might come as a massive shock to her.
Let's get to the news, Pet. So first off, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is a massive spate of hamstring injuries, supposedly.
No, I have noticed this. I actually was speaking about this on a drive somewhere down actually to the Mornington Peninsula Golf Course on, I think it was might have been March the 1st, so 3-4 weeks ago. The topic of conversation was actually exactly this, that with all of the advancements in modern medicine, with all the extra hirings in physiotherapy and in sports performance, sports science and all of these things, it does feel like over the last few years, and 2 years specifically, maybe a bit longer, that we have actually increased both hamstring and ACL injuries over that period of time. And the logical answer is that the players are running further, they're in more bursts, the game is quicker. But you would think as well that they also are fitter, they also are going through such much more rigorous and tested sports performance and injury prevention plans. And if you look to other sports around the world, I actually don't think they're increasing at the same level that the AFL is. So it's like a really interesting case study as to what's actually happening right now with our elite athletes and how many of them are not on the park.
I think one of the broader questions is there actually something happening? I'd like to see the data first. I'm not convinced. I think there have been high-profile hammies that have been done, but I haven't seen any data to suggest there are more or less being done this season than last season than the season before. So I'm just going to reserve judgment. I think the media likes to do what they can to create a crisis, don't they? That's their MO. They want to create a crisis. They want to create a headline, and I think this is an easy one because you're not really putting anybody out. You're just saying, well, there's a bit of a crisis going on. A lot of people doing their hammies. Well, maybe, but is it any more? Is it statistically significant compared to baseline of the last 5 years? I'm not convinced. Same with ACLs. I'm not convinced that there's more or less being done. I think it's probably about the same. I mean, there's a few things that are factual. You would potentially have more hamstrings done in the last 2 seasons given the extra amount of games that are played.
Yeah.
I think that is a factor for sure. You're just going to get the total number is going to be the same. Usually they break it down per playing minute or something like that, so they can get an easily scalable understanding of how many are being done. But I'm not convinced, is what I'm saying.
We do need the stats. I think hamstrings, I'm not convinced either, although obviously a recent state. I am somewhat convinced, though, that ACL injuries have gone up over the last 12 months. I need that to be proven with statistics, and so that's purely off just what has happened and remembering what's happened. I think, to your point, probably the biggest thing that impacts these conversations is the quality of player that gets injured. So let's say we have a year with 15 ACLs and a year with 16 ACLs. If in the year of 16 ACLs, 6 of them are top 20 players, the issue, it feels like it's 3 or 4x the previous. And it's not, obviously. It's exactly the same, if not, nothing to talk about, but it just obviously has such an impact on ticket sales, has such an impact on interest of games, such an impact on broadcast when you lose sort of key players. So it would be interesting to actually get the data before creating the witch hunt or, the rapid sort of media frenzy that they look to create at any sign of negativity.
Did you see that Dacos went down to Tassie the other week?
I did see that.
That's an interesting one. Obviously, there's literally nothing in it, but I think that's another one for the media to just get really pumped up about.
I think you have to, if you're the Dacosses, go down to Tassie. Not just because they haven't tried the spirit of Tasmania for 12 years, but in general, let's say, Tassie, let's say they are meeting with the Tassie, brass. You have to hear the offer. It doesn't mean anything at all, but it's actually remiss of you to not go and...
You got to listen.
You got to listen.
Here's a question. Pie in the sky. What offer would it take to prize Nick out of Collingwood?
There's no offer.
There is no offer, okay.
I think you have to go down the list. It's just not as enticing. I actually think it's got nothing to do with the offer. I think the only way that Nick Dacos leaves for Tassie is if Collingwood win a flag. And or ideally 2. And the reason for that is that otherwise the increase in money that he can make there is fantastic, but the whole legacy thing here at Collingwood and what he can do from an endorsement point of view or whatever, I just cannot see Nick Dacos.
So if they said to Nick, we'll give you $3 million a year we'll give you $3 million a year plus a $2.5 million sign-on bonus. Is that not something that's...
Well, they just wouldn't do it. You can't use your what do they have, $5 million?
Yeah.
They can't use it like that.
You don't think they can't?
I think...
But would that move the needle?
I think clubs are too smart these days. Okay, in a completely theoretical world, if he's offered $3 million and the sign-on bonus, then yes, I think there's a world that is accepted.
Okay, because I think if you told Tassie that would get the deal done, for sure, I think they'd look at it. I understand, like, it's probably one extra top line player that you don't get in the team, but I think they'd be silly not to look at it. I know you're chewing up a lot of salary cap with one guy, but I don't know. I think there's potential for it to work. The opposition to that would be the Gold Coast approach did not work with Gabju. Gary Ablett Jr. went up there for stupid amounts of money. They put all their eggs in the Gary Ablett Jr. basket, and up until a certain point until Gary Ablett blew his shoulder out, it was kind of working. But when you lose potentially that one player, then what have you got below that? Whereas GWS were much more competitive earlier.
Yeah, I have a slightly differing view. Like, I don't think the Gary Ablett Jr. experiment worked on pure results, but I think it actually did drive at least some relevance and interest to an incumbent club and an expansion club almost immediately, and he played some of the best footy, if not the best footy of his career, up there, and which brought just serious interest to the game, and to have that level of player up there and just bring association with that team. So, I think clubs are in a win now mentality. Obviously, there's going to be many years that fans of Tassie would allow Tassie to build up, but I mean, the reason why you're asking the questions is because you probably agree that a signing of that magnitude is something that you can't quite make up for in any other part of your football department, and even from a marketing and ambassadorial sense. And probably the only one in the league right now that fits that bill is Nick Dacos, because Bont's obviously too old.
Darcy's would potentially...
Yeah, but it's sort of got to be a midfielder, doesn't it? Like it's got to be someone who can get 30 every week. I don't know. I feel like that's, because if you get a forward or whatever, and they have a game where they kick a goal or 0 goals, it's like pretty deflating as the marquee player, and that can happen all the time. Of course, if they're transcendent, which we think Sam Darcy's going to be, but actually hasn't done anything. Like Lance Franklin is probably the one, mould that breaks that. That's a completely different type of player. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. Who is next on the list? Like, that actually is worth... I actually think there's a massive drop-off, in terms of impact of a signing after Nick Dacos. It almost has to be someone that that is new, that's coming into the league. I don't know.
There's guys out there. I think they'll find some guys over the next 2 years. I think it's still got 2 years to go, so I think they'll find somebody. But
Kai Loman, with long hair.
What a waste of money that would be. Jesus Christ. Anyway, let's get to the games, Pet. This is actually a pretty wasn't the most interesting round of football, to be honest. There's a couple of interesting games, but I'll go through them really, really quickly. First one was Geelong versus Adelaide. This is actually a big game. This is one for all of the expected score nerds out there. Geelong won the expected score by 50 points, and they only won by 8.
And they nearly, there were things that could have gone against them and led to a loss. Yeah, it looked like a ho-hum thing. Can you take much from the rain, and then when you have an expected score like that, and an expected, I think they were favourites as well. Yeah, it was an interesting game. I think the most interesting thing is that neither of those teams necessarily look like they are bona fide premiership contenders. That's probably what you can take from it. Like, Geelong, as you said, they should have been putting them away. But then if Adelaide, are serious, they can win games like that.
They should win games like that.
Yeah, they just don't have... I fear for Adelaide when, as we know, Rain Keane and Rochelle and those types aren't playing. The fear factor just disappears from that team. And I'm big on that fear factor in terms of premiership winning teams. I think the Bulldogs have enough fear factor now. I think Obviously Brisbane, do, and then Sydney have a significant amount, but sort of have the same problem as Adelaide, where, if Warner, Goulden and Heaney are gone, the team probably doesn't have enough of those other stars around the ball just yet, while your Brisbane's, even your Geelongs still do, but they just don't, they look like they're more of a 4 to 8 side, Geelong, than they do like they're a top 3 side.
The other thing I'll point out about, there's two other talking points. Adelaide, they're always talking about Adelaide's forward line, particularly their tall forwards. Tex didn't play this game. Fogarty he's very meh. Like, he did nothing in this game.
Like every forward that's ever existed that's kicked 300 goals at the end of their career.
Like, he's just not... It doesn't impact the game enough when he's playing poorly. Whereas Tilthorpe started badly on a night that's rainy and just exerted his influence on the game. So I think we've just got to stop talking about the big 3 at Adelaide and talk more about Tilthorpe and 2 other jobbers, is kind of what I'm saying.
I think that's fair. I think the jobbers will be downhill skiers like they're good at. When the game's going well, that's when they'll be around.
The other thing about this one was I didn't realise they were using the arc for these lasso free kicks.
Yeah, I didn't realise.
So they just brought this up during the commentary, and I thought, I've not heard of that. Like, are they doing that now? Apparently they are. And so the arc intervened in a call earlier in the game, which ended up being incorrect. The overrule was incorrect. And then they didn't overrule this Tom Atkins one, where Tom Atkins clearly kicked it. And it should have been a free kick to Adelaide, and it was actually a free kick to Geelong in the end. And they didn't overrule that. So the arc stuffs up times 2. And I don't know whether we're just introducing like another level of complexity to an already complex system and another chance for the arc to just stuff up, basically.
Yeah, I think you've answered your own thing there. Like, yeah, there's a. I think you should keep the arc only to scores, and then just let everything else run its course with natural human error. There's an argument to be said that you remove the arc and VAR from soccer as well, just go back to what it was. But I understand that direct scores, obviously, especially, at the end, particularly of matches, but in general, is something that people are like, we have the technology, let's do it. But just because we have the technology, it doesn't mean we need to use it all across the ground. So I totally couldn't agree with you more there.
Collingwood versus GWS. I didn't really learn that much from this game. GWS they're not going very well at the moment. They've got a lot of injuries. They're back, like Taylor out, Buckley out, etc. Brent Daniels. So they're just running on empty at the moment with their injuries. So they're really, really struggling to get up. And Collingwood just overwhelmed them, to be honest, at Marvel. 2 really good talking points from this game. First one, $3 pies. Apparently they sold 4 times the amount of pies that they normally do.
Incredible. I didn't know that. That's unbelievable. That's worth a talking point.
That's supply demand, man. Supply and demand.
Second one, look, I actually, and look, it just might be the fact that I've always had GWS as my second favourite team to Essendon since they've come in the league. But I watched that game was it on Saturday? On
Friday night.
Friday night, that's it. And I actually saw enough. Like, GWS should have been ahead at halftime. I see enough in the game plan that they try to play that they just didn't execute to perfection again for the 3rd week in a row. But I see that game plan with the talent they have on the list, and I've seen what they've done the last few years. Once they get a few of those players back, but also just the momentum of seeing it work again, which it will happen, GWS is going to be in the exact same spot they always are. They'll be pushing for on the fringe of top 4 by the end of the year, but they won't get there because of this slow start. And they'll be right in that 5 to 9 range, and you just don't want to play them if they're fully fit. Kingsley delivered last week, I believe it was, not this week, but last week, one of the great coaching box sprays that we've seen in the last 24 months. he went on AFL 360 or whatever he went on, and he was just hilarious about it. Later in the week, one of his sprays came out from 2023, probably the best I've seen in the last 5 years. I'll need to share it with the From the Outer social media crew, but it's just incredible. And like, the reason why it's incredible is it's different to the Terry Wallace and other sprays where they're just like yelling, and it's still amazing, and swearing, but he just, his choice and when he uses the timing of swear words, and then when he chooses to go at Toby Green for having the 3 touches in a half, and just blaming pretty much the edit on him. It's just amazing. He actually speaks so well. I would love to play for him. And yeah, again, I think they're just going to claw their way to 13 or 14 wins and be there and thereabouts. I'm not too phased on GWS.
More injured again, hammy. This was a strange one because we just talked about hammy injuries first of all, but second of all, strange one because Darcy Moore heard his hammy kicking, went to the rooms, was assessed, was seen in the rooms kicking the ball, and he could barely kick the ball. Like, he was spraying him all over the place in the rooms. And then they decided to bring him out again. Takes this really great pack mark on the wing, and then proceeds to come in board and then just barely hits his shoe and goes at right angles. And so now he's out for 4 weeks, looks like.
Yeah, it's fascinating that they cleared him. There's got to be something there where they just misdiagnosed it.
Bizarre.
The wincing into... Yeah, I have no idea what's happening.
Completely bizarre. And that more will come out about that as time goes on. But yeah, really, really disappointing. We'll motor through these other games, Pep, because they're actually fairly boring. St Kilda versus Lions. St Kilda were with the Lions for a lot of this game, and the Lions ended up overrunning them. St Kilda 1-3. Not ideal.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Brisbane, yeah. I mean, if you think they're not still the favourites for the flag, then you just don't know how the ebbs and flows of a season work. They showed in half a quarter that when it gets to the pointy end, they'll just do that, 4x in a game. That's going to be a lot of their wins, is going to be half a quarter. St Kilda threw it all at them as well, and were at home under the roof, and had pretty good games from Naz and had pretty good games from other players, and just still wasn't good enough.
Not a good sign for the Saints for me. I mean,
do they make the 8, Chief?
Oh, geez. I mean, based on the current form, they're a wildcard team, but I don't even know. Like, you look at the teams that they've lost to versus the teams that they would have to then go and beat in the second half of the season. And it's hard to make a case for them to winning over 10 or 12 games, which is the same as what they won last year, right? So they haven't, if that's the case, then they haven't improved, even bringing basically $3.5-4 million worth of players into their team.
Well, who do they, just very quickly, we'll go through the games, but who do they go ahead of? Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney, Geelong, Collingwood, GWS, Fremantle, Adelaide, Hawthorn. I have none of those. I have St Kilda finishing ahead of none of those teams. People will argue GWS.
Maybe.
That's the only one you could actually argue.
They just beat them, so that would make more sense. But yeah, I think it's going to be really, really difficult back end of the year for the Saints. I mean, they need to get something going. They did last year, I guess, but the problem is that we're just not seeing the improvement that we thought we would after their huge off-season acquisitions. I respect what the Saints are trying to do, which is buy a lot of players and change the meta in terms of talent acquisition and in terms of how to put together a premiership-winning side. But at the moment, to me, it doesn't seem like it's working. Maybe they take a little bit of time to gel, but they'd want to start gelling pretty soon. Richmond lost to Freo. Pretty boring game, to be honest. Not much to say about that. Now, From the Outer Cup, North versus Essendon. This is a burn the DVD job, my friend. It really is.
It's like, let's not even say it as a joke. That was a VFL standard game, a high quality VFL game. That's definitely from our side, and you lowered yourself to our level. I'm telling you, go watch a good quality VFL game, and there is some better than that. This wasn't the worst AFL game ever by any stretch of the imagination, but it was like, what was terrible was the skills. And Essendon's skills are worse than some of the best VFL teams, and potentially worse than the Essendon VFL team. I watched them on the weekend, and so that's just amazing. And it does happen. The phenomenon of being lowered to another club's level absolutely does happen when the intensity that's created, a lower intensity is created when you keep missing skills. And then that just feeds into what happens. And suddenly North were just missing targets as well. Like, that's the only reason Essendon even remotely had the last little run at the end. But North should have won. They won. Essendon are in absolute disarray as a football club. Yeah, the effort was better, but what a cop-out that is. Like, these are, everyone's on hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they did okay effort. Like, that's not even, I don't even want that to be a headline, that the effort was better. The effort couldn't have been worse. The effort was par. It was sustainable. It was okay. We didn't break any pressure records or anything like that. What we showed is that we can't handball, can't kick. And people will say that comes down to skill only. I disagree. I've been around enough terrible football clubs and there are enough people with terrible skills. When you care more and when your intensity is there, your skills are better. It's just a natural thing because you are more switched on as a club. They come together. The incredible lack of skills comes with a lack of focus, lack of intensity, lack of understanding of what you're doing on the park. So to me, you can never actually separate the two. There's more correlation than people think. North, I look at it from an Essendon point of view and I just say we should be 3-0 for North. We are 2-1. We just take it and move on. And we just don't take much out of that Essendon game because there's nothing to take out of Essendon games this year.
True. Yeah, 100%. That's what it felt like. I think Essendon, to be fair to them, just made it hard to play because they just flooded back. They made it hard to score, which I understand, but they also made it hard for them to score when they got the ball. Talking point out of this one, Sherry.
Oh, what's going to happen there?
Well, he got 3 weeks for.
I didn't see it. Sorry, I thought it was going to be 5 when I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a longer suspension when I first saw it. It's a bit of a jump scare almost. It's like, whoa, you're taken aback when you see stuff like that, and that's how I felt at the time. Obviously what happened was he gave away a 50, and then as he was running back, was pushed and then collected in the face. And he stayed down for quite a long time. And then the ball rebounded down to your end, to the Bombers' end, then back again. And then he ended up getting on the end of one in the goal square and ended up kicking a goal. And then obviously went up to remonstrate with all these other players. And then what happened. He had blood coming from his nose. He wiped his nose multiple times, looked at the blood, and then wiped it on Andy McGrath's face. So, I mean, it's not a good look. And it's basically what, we don't want in our game. So 3 weeks, they kind of got lucky, I reckon, with the 3 weeks.
I want to separate two things here. One is like what really pisses me off in these situations is when there's vitriol addressed at a player like Tristan Sherry's never done really anything wrong. I don't think that needs to come. I think he's just made a pretty significant mistake. And so just judge it on that. And on that, for me, it was a 4 to 5 weeker. Because it's just like one of those things that as a child almost, let alone an adult. Like there's the health risk, the jump scare aspect. But what I don't want is it doesn't need to be made anything more than that. Like it's a shitty mistake that a lot of people have made, that we've all made, and he should be punished for it. And if he's a repeat offender and these things start to happen in a big way, then of course we start to make a big deal out of it. But I think it's just like one of those things where you just have to stamp it out of the game, which is why I want a slightly bigger suspension. But you also don't make it anything, of Tristan and his character or whatever until there's anything much more than that. And so ideally, that's where if you just put some sort of suspension that's not too big, not too little, which to me was that 5 week mark, and then you have Tristan come out, apologise, say, it's completely unacceptable, I understand that. blah, blah, blah. It's not a good role model for kids. And then ideally you move on. Now, I know that's not how the world works, but that's my ideal situation in this case.
So he's done that. He has actually done that, and he rang McGrath and did all that stuff, which is all pretty standard PR now. But, yeah, just 3 weeks rather than 5.
Yep, there you go.
A couple of other games here, and we'll go through these games really quickly. We would actually, in normal circumstances, try and hone in on a couple of these ones, but we just don't have the time at the moment. Port versus West Coast, another couple of teams that potentially aren't playing at AFL standard. Port particularly, I know they lost this game. They were up by a lot, ended up losing to West Coast. Good for West Coast. That's what I would say.
Yep.
Carltank, the jungle drums are beating for Michael Voss. They were up by a lot, up by 40 something, and then ended up conceding basically 14 goals in the second half to lose by 4 goals. So it wasn't even close. They lost by 4 goals in the end. So it was a really poor performance by Carlton, and really heaps the pressure on Vossi and the leadership group down there at the Blues. Big game coming up this weekend as well. Good Friday Super Clash.
I mean, last year North was embarrassed. They would have to be coming in as favourites without having looked at the odds.
I think. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think they are favourites, mate. I think.
Let's have a look.
No, Blues are favourites. $1.60. Is that value?
I think it is value, but I thought that last year with North. I tipped North and bet on them. I think it's better value this year. The issue you have is the reason why they're $1.60 is that they still got up by 44 points against Melbourne, and that's, a lot of it's been pointed to the mental aspect, and they changed the way they play, but they clearly have the capacity to play some decent footy. And North were pretty uninspiring 2 weeks in a row now. Obviously, one of them a win, but yeah, I think genuinely it's that's as big a coin flip as you'll get. That's $1.90, and you wouldn't know which side to go. The last thing I'll say on Carlton, there is something wrong when it happens so often in the second half. Something needs to be addressed. It looks like the players don't play the same game style. Now, you can easily rebunk that and say, of course, the opposition has made changes at halftime, so they're not able to flow in the same way. But we're taking that into account. Let's play chess then. So the opposition's going to make changes. So there has to be then the communication to the players going, these are the changes we expect because this is where we've done really well. Therefore, if those changes happen from the opposition, this is what you should be doing. Feels like that's the part that is just completely missed and why Voss is on the chopping block. It's like we have plan A, but we don't have plan B and C. And that's probably the really important part after half time, is that to expect that the coach isn't going to react to a half is just absolutely ridiculous.
If they get done by big margin this week, then he's done.
He would be. It might be Scott Voss combo.
I think I'll put this out. Even if they lose to North, I think he's done.
I don't mind it.
What are we doing here, Pet? What have you got?
No. Look, to be honest, I'm going to pass on what are we doing here. It's been a depressing week for on-field, off-field for me. It's just... It's really hard when, this is my what are we doing here. It's really hard when you have an outlet in footy, which we both do and which millions of Australians do, and that outlet is almost taken away from you from potentially the most embarrassing period of time that you could ever follow a sporting club. In the history of the world, this is one of the more embarrassing periods of a club that has money and fans, ever. And so, what are we doing here to lose the spark of one of the great outlets? Really puts a damper on life itself, Chief. So
that's you, Andrew Welsh. He's talking about you, sir.
Yeah.
You need to answer to this. My what are we doing here is actually just Vossi generally. I think, I don't know why he's down the boundary, but they're getting overrun.
Yeah.
And Vossi just stands there looking stoic, admittedly, but with his arms crossed, not very demonstrative, not, chatting to the bench coach behind him trying to make changes, just standing there. Players coming on and off, not really talking to them. What are we doing, Vossi? Do something, mate. Go up to the box.
Yeah.
You know. Have you got any low-key cookings this week?
Low-key cooking. No, I think low-key cooking is actually just more of a forward-looking one for people. The line for Western Bulldogs is minus 69.5 against Essendon. It's a take out your mortgage. It's take out your bank. Like, the line should be 104.5. So if you're able to,
that sounds like Gold FM, right?
Yeah, it does.
The Gold FM line.
If you can get 70 still as the line, that is one of the greatest. Bulldogs have a game plan that destroys teams that cannot kick and handball. You know, it's just one of the great game plans to destroy that. They beat us by 90 points last year, I think twice. And what's gonna be different this year? 69.5.
Well, I think the thing is the Bulldogs coming off a bit of a longer run. You know, they've had the bye, so I think the start of this game will be stodgy, and I think the Bulldogs will overrun them. I reckon they'll win by 10 goals, but I think Essendon will just flood back. It's hard to score then.
Yeah, it's not hard to score when scoring on Jackson Pryor and Andy McGrath.
My low-key cooking is Finn O'Sullivan this week. Yes. One of probably the shining light for us on the weekend for the North, played on Zach Merritt in a sort of a stopping role, had 24 himself. He was excellent, but then ended up keeping Merritt to just 10 disposals. So had an excellent game. So well done, Finn. That'll do us for today, Pet. We've got to wrap up because I've got to go back to work, and you've got to go back to the illusion of work.
Yeah, the illusion of work and the illusion of Essendon presidency, as we spoke about. So good to chat, Chief, and look forward to next week back in the studio.
Sounds good, mate. We will see you next week. See you guys.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for watching From the Outer Podcast. If you could like and subscribe, it helps us a lot to continue to create all of this amazing content that you know and love. See you next time.